Hi everyone, this is Anthony O'Flynn coming to you from Ubud in Bali, tropical paradise. Amazing to be here. And I've got my sunnies on because I'm a squinting expert, and if there's one thing I know how to do, it's squint. It's pretty glary here today. And the issue of emotional transformation is a key one, and we first need to recognize that our emotions that we experience really define our life. And by that I'm referring to it defines our experience in this reality ongoing from day to day. For example, many people externally would see someone driving a Ferrari. Perhaps they're in a state of depression, anxiety, anger. Their experience of driving that Ferrari is of a lower vibration. On the other hand, someone driving a scooter could be very happy, very joyful, very content, very fulfilled, very harmonious. And their experience of driving their scooter is of a very high vibration. And so we have the two different examples of one person whose external world would perhaps appear more abundant, more fulfilling, more rich. Internally, they're actually in a state of contraction, whatever the emotion is, fear, anxiety, depression, all the ones that people experience today more and more. And yet on the other hand, another person that wouldn't appear externally abundant, having a rich external experience, as many people would define it, at the same time is more happy, is more fulfilled. So the quality of our emotions are going to determine our experience continually. And for this reason, to invest in your emotional well-being, your emotional transformation, is one of the most powerful things you can do, because you're really investing in your life. And what I find with this idea is that people are so externally focused on what they have, what their postcode is, what they drive, what their socioeconomic status is, and yet inside they're completely withering, completely barren, completely cold, completely blocked to all the small joys in life. So what I'm going to share with you is this connection to transform our emotional state. Because many people today, they're having what we would call mental health issues, and they think that this is a preponderance in the mind. But if I say to you, hey, change your thoughts, you'd say, come on, that's pretty difficult, right? And I totally agree. And yet this is often a focus, that I should somehow try to get these thoughts changed or rearranged or tinkered with in the mind, which is a more difficult process. So what I would suggest to you is that transforming your emotions is actually an easier, more malleable way of transforming how you experience your reality. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that your reality is going to change. Someone is always going to cut you off in traffic, bounce your bananas at the checkout, or do things that are irritating. But our goal is to change how we experience those things. And many people are looking for the magic pill. Well, there's no magic pill to well-being, but there are a lot of techniques and steps we can take to really elevate our ongoing experience and work with a much greater state of acceptance, of accepting things for how they are, of accepting reality for what it is, not our expectations or my expectations on what it should be. So for example, the villa that I'm staying here, it had a blackout just a while back, and there's no electricity. What to do? No electricity. Should I get angry about it? Well, that means I've got two problems. That reality isn't what I expect it to be, but the reality doesn't change, there is no electricity. And then I'm in a state of anger or frustration that there's no electricity and there should be electricity. So my expectations cause me to suffer. Whereas when I go with the flow, I allow that situation to unfold, I allow the fact that there is no electricity, then I'm actually in a state of alignment with what is, with my life, instead of rejecting my experience all the time, which really does create a lot of stress, tension, anxiety, fear of missing out, lack of self-worth in us continually. And hey, guess what? The electricity came back on half an hour later. So it really wasn't that big a deal after all. So what I'm saying here is that when we have this emotional state, it's more changeable. It's the emotional body, which we call Manomaya Kosha in yoga. So the koshas are the bodies, the different bodies. And in this way, we can change our emotional frequency much easier. It's much easier to change how you're actually feeling than to change the actual thoughts appearing in your mind. And this emotional body, the astral body, is actually the doorway, the connection into the mental body itself, the thoughts, the concepts, the ideas. And in this way, we can influence the mental body through the emotional body, Vijnanamaya Kosha, as it's referred to. So this means that there is a doorway into the mental body through the astral body because the bodies are connected. There is a relationship between the bodies. So therefore, by changing the astral body, the emotional body, which is easier to change, it's like a kaleidoscope. It has more of an undulating frequency. We can therefore begin to transform the mental body, which therefore transforms our thought patterns, self-talk, inner talk, and what's going on with this mental chatter, which for some people can be debilitating. It can be extremely negative. So really what we're talking about is this relationship that the bodies have, the emotions have to the chakras by energizing, by activating, by harmonizing, by opening, by cleaning, in essence, the chakras, having a more harmonious frequency, being able to move away from states of lower states of impurity that appears in the chakras and so on, and in our minds and in our emotions, and have a more elevated state of consciousness. So there are three things that we really want to consider when it comes to this emotional state. And it requires self-awareness. It's an ongoing process. But firstly, the intensity. How much of an intensity do you experience these negative emotions? Like on a scale of 1 to 10, for example, it was like, a 9. I was really, really upset about this thing. I was really irritated. Or is it like a 1? It's like a mild irritation, which is like a much lower level. So really how we experience reality, and we're all going to have things from time to time that really are upsetting, really confronting, really challenging. But the goal is to reduce how we experience that in a lesser intensity. So things that are challenging, perhaps we don't even notice as much anymore. We just kind of, well, that happened and that's okay and I'm moving on. Slightly low, mild irritation, if that. But really to get that level of intensity down. And that's really insignificant because the intensity is like, how deep does that emotion go? How much do we experience that? Was it like a burning form of hatred? So many people experience so much hatred today, they don't even recognize it in themselves. Is it like a form of anger, or was it like a deep depression or form of anxiety? To get the intensity down. The second one is the duration. How long did it last for? Was it just a few minutes? Something happened, you dropped a plate of food or something, and it just passed? Or does it go on and on and on? I had a conversation with someone recently who was actually talking about something that happened years ago. I mean, talk about hanging on to the past. They were not able to let this thing go. So the duration, because there can be a flexibility there where something is kind of troubling us for a very short amount of time, maybe a few minutes, maybe an hour, maybe a day. And sometimes you need to process things and allow things to move through. But the duration is significant because it shows how much we're hanging on and bringing that baggage from the past into the present continuously. And in this way, we're actually perpetuating our own suffering. And in many ways, this is a form of self-sabotage because really we're basically continually reliving the past experience. And this is how so many people suffer. They simply can't let the past go. The past is the past, it's done. But we learn from the past, grow from the past process, but then let go. So the duration is really significant. And I know people have different levels of traumas and so on, but the goal, what I'm saying, is to, as best as we can, gradually eliminate, gradually let things go. And particularly with some of the trivial things that people get so annoyed with today, just move on, move on. What was, and move on. And the third one is the frequency, which is the third aspect of this, to transform. How often are these things happening? Because I'm sure you know people that continually have the same experience in a different version with another person or another incident or another set of circumstances, but the one thing that is continual is the emotion that perpetuates from these experiences, and the responsibility that comes from it to change how we're relating to the universe. Because when we change how we relate to the universe will change how it relates back to us. What's being mirrored back to us will change. And if someone is in a state of hostility, in the sense that everybody else is wrong, everybody else has got the issues and so on, and it's going on and on and on and on, what's the common denominator? They are. And if someone is refusing to take responsibility for this, then they're not in an empowered state where they're open to change. So the first thing is to understand, hey, if this keeps happening to me, what's my part in this? What am I doing to create this? How can I create something different? And what needs to change in me? Because these are very powerful questions to show that this frequency is, if something happens to us once a year or once every few months, you can be quite confident that it's something that is not popping up again and again in our consciousness in our life. So these three things, the duration, the intensity and the frequency, are the three ways we can transform our emotional well-being. It's very significant, and gradually move into those states. Give yourself permission. Be patient with yourself. Be compassionate with yourself. Allow yourself time to transform, and allow yourself to make mistakes. You are the one who you should love first. Be the one person that receives your love first, because this lack of self-love is completely debilitating in our culture of self-acceptance, of people being tormented by their inner critic, their self-talk, and gradually become more exalted, open to states of consciousness that are perhaps dormant in your being. So by that, when something good happens, whether it's something very, very minor, focus on that. Change your focus away from what is going wrong, what is bad, to what is good, what is beneficial, what is harmonious, what is beautiful in your life. Because there are wonderful things happening all the time. I mean, here I am in a complete natural paradise today. It's beautiful. What more else could you really need, in a way? And yet the tendency for so many is to focus on a feeling of lack, a feeling of what's missing, a feeling of fear of missing out, a fear of comparison to what other people have in their life and so on. And most of it is always external, and overlooking this inner richness, this inner joy that we all can focus on if we actually take it from the background and put it in the foreground. So for this reason, I'm suggesting the emotional qualities that come related with the heart is this appreciation, this gratitude, this feeling of joy for no reason. If it needs to be externalized, perhaps put it on something that is not such a peak experience, not such something that's like, I'll be happy when. Be now. Like the birds singing in the background, the sun shining on your face, the feeling of the breeze on your skin, the sight of the nature, the sound of the music you like listening to, the feeling of warmth from a cup of tea you're drinking. It really doesn't need to be that complicated. But you know what's the most significant thing? Is to keep the emotional response. Because it doesn't really matter then what's happening externally, because internally there is a far deeper richness, a far deeper source of this well of contentment, this well of appreciation, this well of positivity. So in this way, I'm suggesting that I'm not talking about spiritual bypassing, I'm not talking about suppressing negativity or running away in forms of escape and addiction that are also common. Allow what's popping up into your life, observe it, acknowledge it, but then move on. And the overall focus should be in this state of centeredness in what is good. That doesn't mean the bad doesn't exist, but the rumination that people have today, this continual spinning of these mental wheels of pondering of this feeling of negativity and focusing on the problems, what good does it do most of the time? And I'm seeing this a lot with this experience of people actually wanting to suffer. And if you are at a state in your transformation in your awakening process where you actually realize, hey, I'm actually wanting to complain about this. I'm wanting to experience this negative state because of this. That in itself is a huge breakthrough, believe me, because that shows that there's a part of you that is actually wanting to experience this kind of negativity. It's embodied in the aura, perhaps somewhere, and you actually want to fuel it by finding somebody or something or some event or some experience to project all of that hatred onto, that anger onto, that negativity onto, and make the other wrong, and in this way implicitly making yourself right and therefore better, which is kind of the structure of the ego itself. It's one of the tricky ways of the ego. So the next step from this is then just to move on, to say, hey, I'm actually feeling this, I'm wanting to. And in general, to fuel the negativity. This is a big way that you will create negative emotional states, because it becomes the habit, it becomes the pattern that just is like a river that meanders with this momentum. That's actually, we are actually fueling this momentum a lot of the time in this negativity. So take responsibility for where you're at, take ownership of where you're at, ownership of the negative states. It's okay. Don't make those things wrong. Don't make those things bad. Don't think I shouldn't be thinking this, I shouldn't be feeling it. It's all okay. Welcome it all, but don't dwell on it all. Open yourself to the positive states, to the uplifting states, to the inspired states, and you'll soon find that this will permeate into the mental body, and then you will actually be more inspired in this way to live a positive state, because you'll see the futility of negative emotions, the futility of dwelling on the past, and the futility of focusing on things that you simply can't change. So before the electricity is out, what can I change about it? Nothing. But that's not entirely true. I can change one thing. I can change my attitude to that experience. In essence, I can change how I am experiencing reality. And the more I can become conscious and have this self-awareness to see that ultimately I have a choice, I get to examine myself. I get to have this self-observation where I can ask myself, what am I actually choosing here? And I know this isn't so easy, and particularly when things happen instantaneously, we can naturally go into our reactive patterns. I'll talk about this in another video. But what's important to understand is step back from the situation, observe yourself as a third party in this state of presence, awareness, and ask, what am I choosing here? And perhaps even why? Why am I choosing this? Why do I choose to perpetuate my suffering? Why do I choose to perpetuate this emotional heaviness, this frequency of inertia, stagnant, continually perpetuating the lower vibration? I can do better than that and move on to a more exalted way of being, a more happy way of being, and understand that this process of growth, it requires this self-awareness, it requires effort, but it can be done and you can do it. But what you focus on will determine your reality again and again and again and again. So ask yourself, what am I focusing on? And give yourself permission to live a life of joy and find it in the simple things. Thanks for watching. If you're watching this, you are the shift.